on my computer, but welcome everyone to the LFZ alumni panel. I'm Cass. I'm the program coordinator and I help put up events. And today's MC will be TJ. But we do have our 4 guest panelists, which will be Sam and Tomas, as well as Jacob and Dylan. All right, TJ.
Cool. Thank you, Cass, for setting this up. Before we get going, we have to give Cass an absolutely huge shout out, not only for, of course, doing this and setting it up, but it is her 1-year anniversary with LearningFuze.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I've told some people the story, but, you know, we had opened up a job search probably in, April of 2019. And, you know, we had been, trying to find somebody who could do a little bit of social media, a little bit of event planning, a little bit of career services, a little bit of admissions. And, being somebody who talks about the job search all day, you would think I'd put together a realistic job description, but I was looking for a unicorn. And we're like, if we can find this person, that would be amazing. And I kid you not, we were getting people with master's degrees that were applying. We talked to a few people who had run their own companies, and we're like, I don't know if y'all understand what this role really entails. We need somebody who's willing to wear a lot of hats and take some of the dirty work off of our plate. And after a while, we're like, gosh, we might need to completely change this job description. And luckily, I had connected with somebody who runs or previously ran LinkedIn Local Orange County. And I said, Jermaine, you've got friends, you're connected to UCI. Who do you know? And I kid you not, within a week, he had sent me over Cass's resume. And it was like, wait, how did we miss this person? Where was she hiding this entire time? And obviously we're here. So we were absolutely blessed to have Cass join us, and it's been awesome so far. And she's now morphed into, a digital marketing manager, once again, an events coordinator and stuff like that. So it's been great. So thanks again, Cass. Absolutely. I can't tell you how appreciative I am for all the work that you do. So before we get going, because, we are recording this and Zoom loves to grab the camera and the sounds, please make sure you're muted if you're not talking. If you've got some kids in the background, a dog, or you're coding and you've got your cat, which loves to meow and get some attention, then just please make sure that that's off for now. But what we'll do, we'll kick things off with a little bit of an introduction from each of the panelists. For me, this is super cool because these are all people that I had met, obviously before they even started the program. For example, Samantha was previously working at a kids coding, I guess kind of school program, had met her through that. I met Tomas at the one info session that we did at Concordia University. He was one of 2 people that showed up. And, Jake and Dylan came in and, went through the interview process, and back when we were in person, sitting in the front conference room. But I'm going to stop talking. We are going to start with Samantha. So if you could kind of kick things off, give us a quick introduction. What were you doing before LearningFuze, and how are things going now?
Had to find that unmute button. Okay, sure. So as TJ said, my name is Samantha. I prefer to go by Sam, but whatever you call me, I'm fine with it. So before I started LearningFuze, as TJ said, I was working at a sort of children's nonprofit. So it's called Dreams for Schools, and it's local to the OC. And we were best known for our App Jam Plus program, which paired college mentors with middle school kids for a 10-week program, where these kids learned how to build a mobile app basically in the 10 weeks. And it ended with a showcase / competition judged by industry professionals. And while I was there at Dreams for Schools, I developed a lot of the curriculum for many of the STEM programs that we put on, as well as led trainings, seminars for all of the college mentors that we had come through the program. And it was sort of fun to transition because I used to actually be a college mentor for those kids. And then I went into a more supporting the organization role after I graduated. And then after sort of staying there for a year, I went through LearningFuze, and now I'm a software engineer at Parcel Pending. We are a technology company in OC that makes smart lockers for multifamily communities and retail. And yeah, so sort of like what you see with the Amazon lockers, but for individual communities. So that's my sort of brief intro.
Perfect. That is awesome, Sam. We'll jump over to Jacob, and right after Jacob, you know what? Maybe you prefer Jake. I'm just reading off of the Zoom here. We'll go Jake, Tomas, and then Dylan.
Yeah, so my name's Jacob. Jake is fine too. A lot of people still call me that. So I went to LearningFuze 6/18, so June 2018. Before that, I had been in technology for quite a while, working with like Apple resellers and small shops. Lead technician, just running tech shops, doing the same repairs over and over. Exploring Mac OS terminal and digging through stuff. So I was always kind of curious with that stuff. But I'd reached a point where I wanted to learn more and like acquire some skills that could get me paid more. So I started looking around for different stuff, and I moved out to California. I was looking at some different boot camps, and went to LearningFuze, saw the info session. It was awesome, genuine people, and I'm super glad that I did. It is truly life-changing. The whole process was a lot of hard work, but I'm super glad that I went through with it, and I trusted all of the amazing teachers along the way. I currently work for PriceSpider. We provide e-commerce solutions that involves a lot of data crawling. We crawl 7 million websites a day or something like that, which means a lot of data wrangling. So I build internal tools to help my team members sort through the massive amounts of data and make sense of it. And it's pretty fun.
Sweet. Okay, we'll jump over Tomas. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. My name's Tomas. Before LearningFuze, before coding, I was a glassblower working in the glass industry, mainly out of California. Not far from where LearningFuze is the Laguna Beach Arts Festival community. So there's a lot of really cool artists there. So I had been working there for quite a while, but my interests were always somewhere in tech, and I didn't really know or think that coding was really like an opportunity for me. And about 2 years before I really showed up at LearningFuze, I was kind of interested in a boot camp. I heard really good success stories and awesome things out of the people that had gone through the program from all sorts of schools, really. And so I spent 2017, 2018 kind of looking around at different schools, and I looked everywhere. I had family in Denver, and I went and did some weekend seminar classes there to kind of see what it was like. And I looked up in LA, and I looked down in San Diego, and I ended up with LearningFuze. And I think it was probably one of the best decisions of my life. The program was difficult. There were things that were completely, above my head, and I just had to stop and like ask the question, right? What's going on, and how do I figure it out? But as a result, I think I learned quite a bit, and I ended up getting my first job with Varus, which is a little promo here. And it's been a great experience. I came out to Austin and got a few weeks of working in an office with other developers before the pandemic scenario. But if it's anything, we're fortunate in this industry to be able to continue being productive and if anything, excel in this kind of environment. So I've been a software engineer for the last 7 months, working on a few projects for Varus. We're a digital agency, so we provide a bunch of different type of solutions for our clients, which is great because that means there's a gambit of developers, right? Different languages and tech stacks that are going on in our threads. And if you're new to something, there's somebody who's going to be an expert. So it's been a good experience so far, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
Awesome. I still remember, of course, the glass blowing conversation, and what was it, that there was a Netflix show, I think it was, or Nat Geo, that started to make it popular again. And you're like, this is it.
Yes. Yeah. I forget the name of it. It was on Netflix for sure.
Cool. And Dylan, we'll finish up with you. Take us home.
Sure. Hi, Dylan. Pleasure to meet you all. What is it? I started LearningFuze, or I was at LearningFuze between March of 2018 to June of 2018. Since then, I've been working at my current company, SurePrep. It's a tax automation software company. Basically, the project that I work on is building an interface for consumers and CPAs to be able to do whatever communications and interactions they might need for the CPA to allow the consumer or to do the consumer's taxes properly. But that's going to change soon. I recently got an offer elsewhere, and so I'll be changing jobs pretty soon. But yeah, that's what I do in a nutshell.
Cool. And we will definitely be diving into those offers and what it took to get those offers, because if anybody's wondering, there's some impressive recognizable companies that he got offers from. So I think, starting things off and, kicking things off, we heard a little bit about, why people wanted to, do a boot camp, and a lot of the students are currently, going through it themselves. Let's start with you, Jacob. What was, it like going through the boot camp, and, can you tell us about maybe that first instance of imposter syndrome and how you kind of overcame that?
Sure, yeah. So it's definitely a very difficult program, full immersion. I decided I'm going to do this 100%. I'm going to put everything aside and focus on this 100%, because I believe that you will get out of this program what you put into it. And so I wanted to get the most out of it. Imposter syndrome. I mean, imposter syndrome is just all the time, every day. I can't think of maybe the first week at my first job was where it was like very pronounced, of just like, dang, okay, I got in. They gave me this laptop. I conned them. Like, I don't know, I'm a schmuck. That's just a common thing I've learned, and everyone has it, and it never goes away, but you learn to just put it away because it's dumb, and it's easy to get over it. If you ever get stuck with that, go explain something that makes sense to you to someone who doesn't understand coding, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, I do know things. Explain, I don't know, any concept that you just have in your, that you've learned and stored away, and that's usually how I get over that imposter syndrome.
Awesome. And Sam, you had worked with kids before this and, taught them coding. Do they encounter imposter syndrome, or do they just run through brick walls? And were you kind of ready for it coming into the program, knowing that there was going to be a lot of challenges?
Oh, well, so when I was working with kids, it really just does depend on like who the kid is, what their personality is. You definitely have those like strong personality types that are like, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, I'm a coding master. Like, oh, you just put that there and you just put that there. Like, when I was doing the program, there were actually some kids who had done, or when I was like running the program, there were some kids who had done coding before. And so they ended up knowing more than I did. And I feel like that's what I felt imposter syndrome, because it's like, well, these sixth graders are getting all these, while loops and if statements, and what am I doing teaching them? But it's definitely a fun experience going from teaching kids to sort of being taught, being the teacher before to being the student. It definitely, I feel like it humbled me, because, I knew I didn't know everything. And, it provides, both sides of the coin, so sort of yin and yang to teaching and learning.
And, jumping over to Tomas, you actually started in the part-time program because, you were still working, saving up money, and then, made the jump into the full immersion. What was, that switch like? And, do you have any advice for people who might be looking into, doing a boot camp? And is there too much prep that somebody can do before a full immersion?
That's a good question. For sure, the opportunity to take the part-time program first was my ability to really get my feet wet and figure out what's going on. But as we've been talking about imposter syndrome, there was a moment in the part-time program where I was asked to do a thing that I just didn't understand. And I came in and I got help. And there were some very helpful people at the boot camp to help me understand what was going on. But that was my sort of wake-up call. Like, hey, if you want to do this, you have to be here, and that's my way of learning. That's my sense of figuring out what's going on is about being immersed. So the part-time program really gave me that exposure to say, okay, this is what it's going to take to really learn how to code and figure out what the concepts are. And like, Jacob had said, is like, you just have to make the decision that you're going to be there every day and spend your time wisely. And as soon as I started the full-time program, I was like, oh, I'm the imposter. I have no idea what's going on here. But after a few weeks and just explaining it to other people and then starting to help other people in the cohort or be comfortable with asking questions, it really started to feel like this was the right pace for me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I still remember, when you decided to make that jump and, how exciting it was because, it's like you get a taste of it in the part-time and you're like, wait, there's more. And then you do it all day.
That's exactly what it was.
And then Dylan, one of the things that always impressed me while you were going through the program was your ability to balance both life outside of, the boot camp. For anybody who doesn't know, Dylan was a college rower and he stayed very active throughout the boot camp and was able to do that. Were you able to was there any tips, tricks, things that you took from, being an athlete in college and applying that, to the boot camp and what advice do you possibly have for some of those students? Because I'd imagine it's also something that's stuck with you even into this recent job search, which I'll drop another little hint. Most people prepare for these job offers and these searches for 6 to 9 months. That's how hard it is to get an offer from these companies. So Dylan, what do you got?
Yeah, definitely. So I was in rowing, and for people who don't really know much about rowing, most practices start at 5 a.m. So my morning started very early. And so in college, in order to get everything done in time for classes and what I need to do, by the way, I forgot to mention, I was going into physical therapy when I was in college. So I was a completely different industry at that time. In order to get everything I need done in time, I had to manage my time very precisely, mostly because I actually cared about rowing more so than I cared about school. So it's not ideal, but either way, the time management is what was really important because I would do 2 practices a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, with classes in between. And so the time management was the biggest takeaway I got from that college experience. And so knowing that in order to get what I need to get done in a timely manner, time management is key. I was really fortunate that at least with coding, it's something that I could do for hours on end without really feeling like it's work. So for me, I got really lucky on that one. Whereas with school, it felt like forever. But in the end, as long as you know how to, allocate the appropriate amount of time for each task and knowing how to time box things, as in like not starting a task and refusing to stop until you get it done, just knowing how to limit yourself on those kinds of situations definitely helps. So I guess the main takeaway from that is to know how to time box things and know your limits on things. Otherwise, you can dig yourself into a rabbit hole and things will go overboard a lot. We have a lot of meetings at work that go over time because people don't know how to time box the thing that we are discussing about. So suppose we did, meetings would be efficient and we would know that, oh, we should probably be done with this particular task at this particular time. So yeah, just essentially just knowing how to time manage.
Yeah, and Dylan, don't worry, we'll do a little snake version here. We're not going to loop back around and make you wait.
Yeah, sure.
What's it like working at a product company, and then on top of that, a product company that, I mean, apologies if I offend anybody, but I don't think tax is the sexiest, most exciting thing, for most people. Most people don't look forward to it. So what's it like working at a product company that's also making something that people kind of try to put in their rearview mirror?
Right. So with our product, it's particularly for CPAs to do the taxes for consumers. So at least on that end of the product, the consumer themselves don't have to worry too much about the taxes because they're literally just tossing it over to the CPAs. I do that myself too, so I'm pretty happy with that. But so the thing about our app though, it's a 2-sided application. There's one for the CPAs and one for the consumer. For the consumer, we have to make sure that it is essentially as perfect as it can be. And that gets a little bit more annoying because they are the end user essentially. Whereas the CPAs, if something's not perfect, we can get away with it. Essentially, we're still getting their money. And they're still going to use their application. And so at least with taxes, it's nice in the sense of job security, because you know that taxes are never going anywhere. Through COVID, I knew that I wasn't going to be let go for anything, which was really fortunate for me. Like I said, taxes weren't going anywhere. So in terms of the product being taxes, in the end, our designers do a really good, and the BAs, business associates, do a really good job at making the application flow very well and seamless for the consumers. Essentially, we just bring it to life. And so sometimes the business don't see all the potential user interactions that might come with an application. So tossing it over to the engineers, as the engineers are able to make, when bringing the application to life, we can bring out those nuances of small transitions and animations that most people take for granted in terms of an application, but really give that little extra flourish that makes the user experience a lot better. Like I said, CPA side, whatever, not too big of a deal. But for the consumer side, we always make sure that the attention is really detailed, because in the end, the user is, they're our customer. So we have to make sure that is as clean as it can be for them. Therefore, they'll more likely use the application and be happy with their services.
Awesome. And we'll jump over to Jacob here. Jacob, you mentioned earlier you're working with a lot of data, and your company's scraping data from across the web. I think it was 7 million websites a day. Most people don't think of JavaScript as a data focused or language that it's built for. What tech stack are you working in? Did you have to learn anything on the job and for your new company?
Yeah, so because we deal with so much data, we have a pretty spread out tech stack. So JavaScript's not doing much of the scraping. If I can go through like the pipeline, let's see, I think we're doing a lot of like C# and Python and some other like Puppeteer. And then it goes into a whole system of databases, Postgres, BigQuery, all this, all sorts of different stuff. What I work on is I work in JavaScript, so I work in React, TypeScript. I had to learn TypeScript on the job. That's super easy and straightforward, in my opinion. It's something that you can study and pick up as you go, and you're going to hate your code editor for a little bit when it's yelling at you that your things aren't typed correctly, but you'll get good at it and learn to like it. And then we use like Node, GraphQL. What am I missing? So quite a bit of different stuff. I do a little bit of Angular JS, but I try to avoid it. And yeah, so I have a whole suite of like internal web apps that we are constantly improving and working on and adding features. And we deal with complicated data. So we have different teams that are, say, matching this data, this URL we scraped versus this product in our database, and coming up with matches or automating it. So we're always doing new and exciting things. I personally found, I feel like when you go through this, you're gonna find what you like to do. So maybe you love designing databases, maybe you love UI, UX, whatever. I personally enjoy building UIs. I love and then sometimes dipping my toes into UI, UX in the design process, and giving, someone showing me, okay, here's our UI and it looks difficult. And in my mind, I'm already thinking of how it's going to be built out and how to design it the right certain way that it's robust and easy to maintain down the road. So I find all that kind of stuff fun. So
that's awesome. And when learning a new language, like at PriceFighter, what was that process like? What was the conversation like with your manager? How much time and flexibility did they give you to learn some of those new things? Because I think a lot of people think, oh my God, I'm going to have to go into a company. They're going to ask me to learn C#. And if I don't do it within a week, I'm fired. Is that the case?
No, not at all. So you got to realize you're coming in, and whether you think you're a junior or not, you don't have experience, and everybody knows this. So no one's going to expect you to be like a genius engineer that, everyone's, you're hired as a junior for a reason, and they know you're going to have to learn things and it's going to take time. So the first week is you're not touching code for the most part. Maybe you are, but you're doing a lot of setup. Yeah, I was told, hey, you need to learn TypeScript. Here it is. Here is some courses that we have passwords and logins for that you can study while you're working. So I went through like a week of courses. I started, setting up some of these projects and looking through it. And you kind of just, that's one thing too that a tip for when you're learning is learn to look at other people's code. Try and find like a repo of like a certain app that you really like and explore it. Like, I don't know, I played Destiny. So like, and Destiny item manager is built in React. So go check out the repo, pull it down, play with it, because you're going to be in a lot of, other people's code quite a bit. And that's like an art in itself of trying to figure out what were they thinking when they did this. And but as far as learning on the job, they were pretty open and flexible with it. Nowadays, we have like certain days, like maybe on a Friday, where we can, if our sprint's pretty light, we get personal project time. Go work on whatever you want. Go read some articles. Go get better at hooks and that kind of stuff. And then we'll talk about it later, or go do some practice problems. So it's kind of nice that I have that flexibility.
Yeah, no, definitely. Getting paid to learn is always fun. And then Sam, you joined a company, Parcel Pending, that was recently purchased for $100 million by a European company. It is, previously there's been a few other purchases here in the OC tech scene, but it was, the talk of the town, if you will. So what was it like joining what it typically would be called a startup, because it was still only about 5-6 years old, yet going through kind of this transition and, having a lot of different moving pieces and being thrown into, a fairly, not, I wouldn't say small, but, very strong engineering team?
I mean, it was definitely crazy. And, you can call us small because I'd say we are small, but we're mighty. That's the important part. Yeah, and I mean, even now we're still getting used to the acquisition and working with our parent company, Quadient, which is actually a French company. And so now because of that acquisition, we're having to work with a lot more remote developers. Like there's development teams in France that we're communicating with. There's development teams, in Vietnam that we're communicating with like on a daily basis. And, our VP of engineering had to fly to France when COVID started, which is absolutely crazy. But it definitely forces you to sort of, amp up your communication. If someone asks you a question, you want to be able to respond right away. And, sometimes that involves, responding to questions that come in at like 11 at night because, someone halfway across the globe is asking you this question. But it definitely gives you more perspective, I guess, on just like how much you need to be able to communicate to be able to work in software engineering. But it's been a lot of fun, it still kind of feels like a startup just because, we're still pretty small. So we sort of have that startup feel, but definitely we're growing and we're growing fast. So it's cool to sort of be able to see this all sort of come together. The engineering process has been beefed up even a lot since I first started. And like the agile methodology we're using, it has been growing over time, and we're still working on it, but it's definitely getting a lot smoother. And just to be a part of that process and the feedback loop for developing that structure and flow has been really rewarding.
That's awesome, and it'll be fun to follow along with the company as it continues growing. And, Tomas, I meant to, finish up with you because you're working at an agency. So it's a little bit of a different environment. Can you kind of tell people, I guess, a little bit about what an agency is like? And I believe you mentioned you're on project number 2 and you are the lead engineer, which is awesome. I mean, you're people might be like, oh, it's a junior developer. No, you're the lead. So what's that like?
Yeah, it's wild. Talk about imposter syndrome again, right? It's working with agencies, I think, really cool. And maybe some of my past experiences, especially in the glassblowing world and dealing with clients, has transitioned over into this experience here, which is something I want to point out for everybody that's through this bootcamp, right? Is your developer stories, like everything that's behind you, everything that was before you decided to get into this process is still of so much value. Because what I'm doing in part of my job is communicating with those clients and having that discussion about what the product is supposed to do, right? Or what these features are supposed to look like. And so in that front end process, I'm working with a designer, and it's most of that UX UI conversation with product owners or business analysts as well. And we're figuring out what's important to them, right? What do they want out of this technology? And then I get to go back and apply, you know, my knowledge and what I understand out of the front end, out of the technology to make that front end possible for them. So it's an exciting process. There's always curveballs that come to you, and working with clients, you know, sometimes you have your tickets and your day planned out, and then you get a message at 7 a.m. Hey, we really need this thing now. And you say, okay, all my plans are aside. I need to do what the client you know, says is important, and you just gotta kind of be able to respond to those. You know, I call them curveballs, right?
Sweet. And Dylan, I think it's time to reveal where you've accepted an offer, and this is where we'll transition to some pieces of advice for whether it's alumni currently in the job search process, possibly even alumni who are maybe looking to get ready for their second job search like you did. Tell us a little bit about those offers from the FANG companies and where you're ending up.
Yeah, so about a month ago, I got offers for both Amazon and Facebook. I decided to go with the Facebook. I felt like their opportunity was a bit better. There's an asterisk that goes with that, but I don't want to go too much detail into that. But anyway, it's a 12-month program, mentorship program, and then after the 12 months, there's a good likelihood of a full-time conversion, simply put. But in terms of preparation, so this actually all started back in March. I was actually interviewing for Google, and they rejected me at the second to last step before extending an offer. Broke my heart right in two, and so I went hard again up until I got these offers. And in hindsight, the only thing that really stopped me from actually trying to go for these companies was simply just the application. That was the only thing that stopped me before, because let's say if I were to do this last year, I'd tell myself I'm not ready, and they're probably not going to look at my resume. But in hindsight, these companies are so big that it doesn't cost them really anything to look over your resume if they get that application. Obviously, if it's not a reasonable resume, like absolutely zero relevant coding experience, if you put at least some kind of education like LearningFuze, they might glance over it. But with some relevant experience, they're more than likely to look over it and at least give a phone call to see where you're at, because Google or any of these companies promote diversity in terms of backgrounds and where you come from. And what is it? They believe in giving people these kinds of opportunities. And so when I got the interviews, no doubt they were definitely hard though, but after these experiences, I realized that they are willing to give just about almost anybody the opportunity, and people who can prove themselves get the offers. And I've heard plenty of stories of people getting Google offers right out of boot camps because they just simply applied, right? So they just sent in the application, got a phone call, but in the end, as long as they can prove themselves as worthy of being at these companies, they'll be considered and potentially hired. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, and huge
Cool.
Congratulations, of course, and
Thank you.
lots of clapping emojis went up, which is awesome. So going through the interview process with Facebook and Amazon and Google, do they ask the data structures and algorithms questions that we're expecting? How much prep did you put in? And if, let's say, you were coming out of the boot camp, do you think you could have put in that time and prep and been in a good position to be ready for it?
Right. So if I were to be frank, I don't think if I came straight out of the boot camp, I would have been prepared enough. Let's say I finished the boot camp and the next day I apply. I don't think I would be prepared. It did take a lot of extra preparation in order to be what I would consider prepared to handle these interviews. But to be honest, it only took me about 3 weeks of very, very rigorous studying to consider myself prepared for these interviews. Like I said, with Google, I got rejected at the second to last step prior to the offer, which means that from the first interview to the full round or the on-site interview, I was able to put myself through all of that And I spent about 3 weeks before the first phone interview to do all of that. So it took a lot of leak code, a lot of algorithms. I don't know if you see me on Slack, but for a while I was posting to if anybody wanted to do practice problems with me, I was doing that. A lot of that, and also the thing that definitely helped the most was practice interviews with my friends, because they were also interviewing at the same time too, so I got really lucky with that. But doing live coding in front of someone definitely really helped, because it forces me to essentially simulate the environment that I would be in a real interview. It's easier with friends, but there's also another service called Pramp, which matches you up with strangers. Well, not strangers, but like other engineers who are also interviewing. And that you basically put each other through a mock interview. And that definitely helped. I actually met a good friend who also works at Facebook through this service. And so basically he vouched for me for Facebook. And so that was really nice of him. And now like we're buddies now, so.
That's awesome. And, you know, it just shows that, you know, there really isn't a downside to the hard work, you know, that you put in, you know, for stuff like that. And obviously, you know, you were rewarded for that hard work. Jacob, heading into your job search, what was the interview process like with PriceSpider? Did they go to the data structures and algorithms, or did they ask some different questions?
Sure. So I'll kind of lead up to that. So I was getting portfolio ready, starting to apply. I came up with like my schedule of waking up, setting out like applications like early morning, 8 o'clock usually is when I start sending things out. The idea is you could get it to HR's desk before they come in at 9, start a correspondence, get back and forth by lunch. That was kind of like my thought process behind that, and be in front of the line and get interviews scheduled. So I was going through lots of different, I started getting some interviews as I was figuring things out. I was interviewing for this company that I went 4 interviews deep, and it came down to me and another person. And while that was going on, I finally got something back from PriceSpider, who I applied from via LinkedIn, and they got back to me a month later. And they gave me a coding practice problem. So, hey, build this simple thing. And like they kind of give you some freedom, but like you should know this job listing's for React, so you should probably use React, those kind of basics. So I was applying for the other job, and I was like, well, I'll just do this practice problem at the same time. Even though this other one, it's starting to look pretty good, I think I'm gonna get this job, I might as well do this other coding practice. So I sent that in, and that got through, got accepted. I did really well on the coding problem. The 4 interviews job said no. I got all the way to the end and got axed. And I'm actually super glad that I didn't get that job, because the job that I got is way better. It was what I wanted to be in. It was the stack that I wanted, as opposed to the other job was like a step up to like where I want. So. But with the, so after the coding practice problem, okay, we know we can code. It was an in-person interview, whiteboarder. And I asked, so they said, you're gonna come in for a whiteboard. I asked them like, well, could you tell me what this is gonna be about? So I did a little prying, which is something I learned that you should do. It doesn't hurt to pry a little bit, like who's gonna be there, what's it gonna be on? So they said, okay, here's who's going to be there, and what it's going to be is recursive JavaScript functions or something like that. So I, before the interview, I went to all of their LinkedIns and studied the people that I was going to be in the interview with, trying to get an idea of who they are, where they're from. Okay, this guy's been in the industry for 10 years. This dude's going to be the head honcho, and then this person's, you know, like trying to get a character reads on them. And then so I went to Google and said most common recursive whiteboard problems, and I found a list of 10, and I was studying them all. And then so I got into the interview, and it was a recursive question that I just studied the night before on that top 10 list. And that's like the best feeling, going into a whiteboard, and they're like, they think they're gonna give you this tough question, and you're like, okay, I know this, as opposed to the question where you're struggling in the whiteboard of like, I don't know how to get to the answer, but let's try and get there. So that was nice. And so I did the whiteboarding. I was discussing kind of like what it is, what's going on, trying to convey to them that I knew what I was doing. I was also a teaching assistant at LearningFuze at the same time. And that was nice because it kind of helped me strengthen my JavaScript skills, like certain basics, coercion, closures, certain things that I just, when you teach them, they get cemented. So I was able to speak knowledgeably on it, and I got the offer.
That's awesome. Yeah, gotta love the prep going in, looking up the interview questions, and it just so happens to be that one. I mean, we still hear every once in a while about students who get FizzBuzz. Sam, did you get a whiteboard in your parcel pending interview, or do they handle it a little bit differently?
I did not. I feel like my job search experience was very unique in that sense, and that I feel almost bad for saying it. It wasn't that difficult. So I had my first interview with one of the managers who is in engineering, and going into the interview, I had no idea what to expect. Like, I thought they were going to give me like all these hard problems and give me like a bunch of, you know, difficult technical questions. So to that end, I reached out actually to one of the alumni from LearningFuze who used to work at the company. And I definitely recommend this to like anybody who is applying to these jobs. You know, if you know that someone has been at that company before who is like at LearningFuze, or even if you just have like a connection, you know, leverage that. Leverage any sort of connection you have to get that, you know, one step above the others. And so he told me more about, you know, the company culture and like what his interview was like, which was reassuring for me, because then I could, you know, prep a little bit in advance. I mean, ultimately, my interview ended up being a lot different than his, that mine didn't have that technical component, but it was still helpful to have that knowledge in advance to definitely, you know, be a little more calm going into it. So I had my first interview, and it was, you know, pretty casual. And after that, I had my second interview with the VP of engineering, and you know, pretty much they asked me a little bit about my background. And I guess I should have mentioned that I had a minor in computer science from college. And so that was something that I was able to talk about during my interview, and something that they really liked on my resume. So after that, I got an offer. So I guess I was really lucky in that sense. But, you know, a real man makes his own luck, as they say. So definitely, if you're a recent grad or soon to be recent grad, you know, make your own luck, apply to as many places as possible, leverage your connection. And, you know, you don't have to sell them on your skill. They know that, you know, you might not be the most skilled, you know, coder right now, but sell them really on your potential. And that's why the, you know, the coding backstory, or your personal backstory is so important during these interviews, because it gives them a glimpse into, you know, what you've done in the past and how you can bring that into what you're going to do in the future.
I kind of want to piggyback off of that real quick, though. A lot of interviewers that I've talked to, and how we carry our interviews at my current company, is we hire people based off of what the engineer that they could be versus the kind of engineer that they are today. And so, because anybody can learn how to code, but you know, just because you can't do something at this moment, at this time, doesn't make you a bad engineer. So we look at potential rather than what you can do today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, companies know they're investing in you, and it's going to take a little bit to ramp up, and, you know, they're constantly going to be investing in you. You know, Jacob was telling us how often his company says, continue learning. You have some free time, you know, oh, you're jumping into a new project. Tomas, did Verus hire you because of the glass blowing background, or was there something else that ended up to that getting the offer?
There's no glass blowing at Verus. It's strange. It's really weird. I don't understand it. You know, thinking about the whiteboard in the interview experience, and to follow what's been said already by these panelists, I think I got along well with the people that I had the interview with. We had a fluid conversation, and there were things that were thrown at me that were a little bit difficult for me to understand. But asking the question, or saying, "Hey, I don't really understand what this thing is," demonstrated my willingness to just talk through it, right? Because I think that the hardest part, and this, you know, theme about, you know, feeling imposter syndrome, is that you're afraid to look like you don't know what's going on. But the reality is that you're going to learn so much faster as soon as you acknowledge that all you have to do is ask, right? Or just look up the right resources. There's plenty of times, even in my current job, where the client asks for something and I'm like, okay, I kind of know some of this, but I'm going to need to research these things, right? These are my resources that I'm going to dig into. And even that level of communication establishes so much trust and understanding for what they're paying for as a, as a digital agency. So there are things, throughout the entire development process that you have to be willing to just say, this is where I am right now, but it's not who I'm going to end up being, right? And you can always learn more.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's I think theme here is communication, communication, communication. And there's nothing worse than over-promising and under-delivering. And, when you come into a lot of these interviews, these engineers and these managers, they can sniff it out. They know when you're BSing them. It is their radar. They love it. And then as soon as they smell it, they see it happen, they are going to pounce. So everybody has put up with my cheesy jokes and transitions for long enough. If anybody has any questions, what we'll do really quickly, because I am going to go into a quick lightning round for everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat on the side or raise your hand in the participants bar and we'll get to you. So lightning round questions. If two things, two-part. One, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, whether it was during the boot camp, after the boot camp, before the boot camp, what would that be? And then what is your current favorite technology library or framework that you are working with? And we will start, we'll go Jacob, Tomas, Dylan, and then Sam.
Advice for myself, always keep learning. People skills are extremely valuable. Coding skills anyone can get, but figure out how to be like a good communicator and how to work well with others. That's going to be very huge. You're always going to be in a team for the most part. So different personality types, how to mesh with them is going to be very valuable. What was the other exciting tech?
Yeah, favorite piece of favorite current technology, language, framework, or library that you're working with?
I mean, I always just love React. That's kind of my jam. Trying to build flashy UIs. I tend to live in the MERN stack for personal projects, but I don't know about anything new and exciting.
No, that's fine. Sometimes the OGs are the best, and not really an OG, but newer. Tomas, what you got?
To my younger self, do it sooner. As I had mentioned, I looked around boot camps for 2 years and was hesitant on pulling the trigger for so many reasons. But the developers that I engage with, that I consider to be my mentors, that are 2 years ahead of me in terms of experience, that's the place I want to be, right? So had I started sooner, I'd be there now. And every opportunity that I've had to teach someone or explain something of code to somebody else has been a really good experience for myself and for them, I hope. So I always look forward to that time ahead, right, as an optimist. And if I had to choose my favorite, I see Kevin Akahoshi in here. We've had the discussion a few times. I used a lot of Material UI for the React framework for styling, or a library. It's always up to discussion. It's one of my favorite ones to have. But we use it a lot, for our clients. So it's been a lot of fun to use.
Awesome. Okay, Dylan.
Still mine. I also said start sooner. But if anything, leak code sooner at least. I think that is just those algorithm problems set the foundation as to how to program in general, right? They're not very practical in the real world, but in terms of getting your brain to think that way, invaluable. You can't beat it. It's grueling work, but it's so applicable when you get to at least thinking in that way. And of course, React is like the go-to tech stack, but if we were to add another layer to it, I gotta say Gatsby. Gatsby is such a godsend. It makes things so much faster, so much under the hood for you that it just does so much. And if you're not familiar with Gatsby, basically what it does, it takes React code and builds static pages from it. As a result, your code is really prepared for SEO, search engine optimization, and it's just lightning fast. Like there's literally no loading because everything is already preloaded when you build it because they're nothing but static pages. So Gatsby is just godsend. But I've been playing with Vue recently, and I gotta say, Vue is starting to win me over a little bit. I still like React more, but Vue is growing on me. So that's my favorite so far.
Ooh, he's got a side framework library that he's talking to. Sam, what you got?
My advice to myself now and forever will always be ask more questions. I don't know why, but sometimes I just like to torture myself and suffer in silence when, there's a whole network of developers and, senior engineers that could be asking more questions. And, that helps not only them, but I mean, it's a two-sided thing, it helps them, it helps me, and they get just a chance to, delve deeper into the problem and do a more full analysis on it. And in terms of technologies, I'll say SQL because I've been learning a lot of it recently. We sort of touched on SQL when we were in LearningFuze a little bit, but now I've had the chance to really dive deeper into the language and learn a lot of the more sort of obscure functions and things that you can do with like databases. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And we've got a question from Shep. This one's for you, Tomas. As a UI lead in a client-facing role, how do you walk the fine line of managing scope creep?
Man, that's such a good question. And it comes from two places. It's not just the client that wants all these insanely awesome things that you can agree with that are really cool, but will take so much more time to develop. But even from our own team, right? Working with the designer, sometimes he wants to blow the client, out of the water, just say, hey, look at all these cool things that we can produce for you because we want to be impressing our clients. But the reality is you have to really work towards establishing what those values are in the very beginning. And I was fortunate in this project to work with the kind of bridge project that was basically scoping out the entire bid for the project and saying, what requirements do you have? And then when we put together our proposal, we went, item for item, making sure that what we were going to create was going to account for all the things that they requested. That way, later when we have the conversation with product owners or designers and they say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if when you hovered over this thing, a video popped up, you'd be like, it would be cool, but we didn't talk about that when we, initially decided on doing this project. And if they really want it, then we have the discussion about, continuing the project further, which is, hopefully a win-win for everybody involved in the process. But to answer the, the question specifically, it's defining guidelines, right? Being very clear about what the client expects and what you are going to produce as a result of that, and sticking to that timeline.
That is awesome. And it is wrapping. Oh, we just got a big one here. Okay, from Evelyn. Thanks for taking the time. For those of us going to graduate soon, what is one thing you would recommend us starting to do right away that will help with the job search?
Leak code, no doubt. Leak code. Yeah, simply put.
Yeah, practice problems in general, because essentially now I get a ticket and it's 20 like practice problems stringed together, or you're just going to learn these things that are going to be super valuable. So like Dylan was saying.
I do want to add one more layer to that though. Just knowing your language that you're choosing very well. We test, one of our interview questions is super basic. The bottleneck of how fast you should answer this question, it should be how fast you type, because it is that rudimental, but a lot of people get stuck on it. And it's because they simply don't know the fundamental of, in our case, JavaScript. So just knowing how the language works, that if you're going to choose a weapon, you should know how to use your weapon well, right? So it's that kind of mentality. Yeah.
There we go. We'll dive into the next one. For Jacob, going back to your LFC cohort days, who was the coolest fellow student to work with, and why was it Federico?
I'd say it definitely was not Federico. He was a terrible coder. He stole my final project idea.
That's a great one too, because I was just rolling through that, and as I get to the end of it, I'm like, oh, he just set himself up for that one. Did any of you have any mentors when you were going through, and would one of them possibly have been Donald Tran? Maybe. Okay, I guess we're knocking that out in the chat.
That was actually super helpful, having somebody with experience walking us through our final project and seeing how like the wheels were turning in his head versus like as a junior, you're just like, this guy is just like on another level. That was really cool to see. I don't know, when I was trying to learn about development, I was like a sponge, and I would like these meetings, I would always be so interested in like what anyone is saying. Any developer is talking about this, you know, meetup about JavaScript or about this, I'd always just like try and soak that up. So yeah, Donald Tran, it was nice to work in your presence and see some of that super smart developer stuff.
Sweet. Oh, Tomas, you want to add something?
Yeah, just about mentorship in general. You know, something that I experienced personally from being in the LFC environment and being able to go up to almost anybody and say like, hey, can you help me with this thing I don't understand? And then getting into a new job and feeling uncomfortable with saying that to new people, right? Or people you don't know yet. It's incredibly important to still have those channels somewhere in your life and through the development process, you know, while you keep growing and trying to push the boundaries wherever they are, right? Even if they're still an LFC, if it's a different development network or whatever it is, but just keeping that idea of like, where are you aiming towards and who are you engaging with? That's a level up, right? Where that you want to go towards. It's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to kind of wrap things up on is, you know, LearningFuze has an amazing community. And, you know, just to really an example of that is that we have somebody like Donald Tran, who actually was in the cohort before me when I was coming through. And I mean, Donald, how long has it been?
Cohort, what, 13, 14? It's been three years and some change. About 40 months.
Yeah, and this is, you know, just one of those things where, you know, this is somebody who's, you know, almost 4 years into his career. He's still coming back. And I think, you know, for anybody who's out there to build off of Tomas's point, you know, we're, you know, not only is the LearningFuze community here to support you, but just about any, you know, tech, you know, a meetup group that you go to, you know, forum or channel that you join, the reason that people are there is because they want to help. The people who don't want to help aren't there. They hide, they sit back, they, you know, they don't participate. They don't make themselves available. So don't be afraid to ask. You know, worst case scenario, somebody's going to ignore it. They're going to ignore the message. They might not get it. And, you know, it's not, you know, rejection to your face. So with that,
TJ,
Dylan,
though,
yeah.
I do want to add to that, though, something I realize in most industries in general, and I kind of buy into this, it doesn't sound the best, but something to keep in mind, is that most of the time people are more than willing to help you, but almost every time they don't really care if you succeed. So given that, that puts the pressure of your success on yourself. So it's not good to go to someone for help and expect them to like follow up, like, hey, how are you doing? You should get their help and then take that help and make yourself succeed from it. Because in the end, like I said, everyone's willing to help, but no one really cares if you succeed. And if you keep that mentality, that pushes yourself to make sure that you take that information for your own success.
We're just going to mic drop that right there. And that's it. Thanks again, everybody, you know, who obviously participated, the alumni who were on the panel. The alumni have come back to answer questions. Cass for putting this together. We will wrap things up right now. Hope everybody has a great evening. Stays cool out there. Cass, any final notes?
Yeah, so honestly, thank you to everyone. It really wouldn't be the LFZ community without you all. So thank you for attending, coming back, contributing, and learning, right? And that's the most important part. And so, yeah, thank you and have a great night.
I do want to say
Thanks,
one more
everybody.
thing. Just for you know, me giving back to LearningFuze community, because I'm forever indebted to LearningFuze to my success in my career and such. I'm always happy to provide mock interviews. I'm always doing that. I might not be doing practice problems like I did like a month ago, but I'm more than happy to put people through a mock interview. And because I know that definitely helped me get my career where I am right now. So if you're ever interested in that, just feel free to shoot me a message and I'll be happy to put you through a mock interview.
Thank you. But yeah, thank you everyone, and definitely have a wonderful night. Bye.
Thanks, Cass.
Bye.
Thanks, DJ.
Thanks, Cass.
Bye.